give this a bit of context, and I'm joined in studio by EACC CEO Abdi Mohamud to give this context. And let's just get your thoughts and opinions first from that report. Do you think there is government will from the top office to fight corruption?
Yes, I believe there is, and I have good reasons to say that. When we are looking at issues to do with support from the government, you look at three key issues. The first one being the tone at the top. What we mean here is, what is the tone that is being communicated from the top? We've seen in the recent past the instructions, or rather the directions given by His Excellency the President on how to fast-track cases of corruption. Out of that, currently we have a bill that is right now before the National Assembly. That bill is called the Anti-Corruption Amendment Laws Bill 2025, which we believe is going to change dramatically the way corruption is fought in this country. The second one, which we look at as people who deal with corruption, or rather fight corruption, is whether the institutions that fight corruption are sufficiently given sufficient budget. I can confirm that despite the serious economic challenges that we are going through, those institutions that deal with the fight against corruption have not had their budgets cut. Their budgets, the budget of EACC, the budget of the ODPP, were not affected in the recent reductions of budgets in most of the public institutions. Third and final is what we call interference. As far as we are concerned, we've not had any interference whatsoever from any high government official in the work of the Commission.
Right. So I ask this because it lays a very good background for, I think, what happens next. From this report, the President is being seen meeting questionable people who have questionable character. That is one. Two, just yesterday, the Deputy President did say that State House is this hub and the center of corruption. Again, I ask, do you believe the tone from the top really wants to fight corruption?
We believe in what we hear from His Excellency the President. Politics can be played at any given time. We are not basically people who just follow what politicians say. This is an independent organization that is constituted by the Constitution of Kenya and the legislative, the legislations that actually constitute the Commission. So politics is not our business. Ours is to deal with offenses that are actually committed in the course of the activities of public officers. So unless you point to a specific, offenses,
right.
Issues to do with politics can be.
Can you point to one? Let's say the Adani question, for instance. How far has the EACC gone to unravel the question that Kenyans had for, 3 months?
We did not even investigate the Adani case. To our knowledge, that matter has been discontinued, that procurement has been discontinued, and we did not investigate. So I wouldn't want to comment on a matter that the Commission did not handle.
All right. Let's get to your report. And I mean, you'd appreciate that Kenyans have always asked you. It's not a new question. As a person who's been in the EACC for 20 years, Kenyans have asked, where's the big fish that you're frying in this report of yours?
If you read the report, you will definitely see, high-placed public officials, if that is what you mean by big fish.
Right.
Governors are there in this report. Other senior public officials are there in this report. So if you want to point at a specific caliber of people, probably you would want to mention that. But let me say this, that corruption is not all about the big fish. It is all about any public officer who is involved in corruption. And if you read our report, you will clearly see that all manner of public officials are actually covered in that particular report.
I would ask, you don't think that sort of getting a big fish sends the right tone? In this sense, that as we speak today, we've had devolution for 14 years. We have had reports since then that governors, members of county assembly, and other officials are stealing money, public monies. But as we know today, None of the governors who've completed their terms, they are in prison under lock and key. Do you think that's a fair place to judge the work of EACC and the work that you do?
Well, EACC basically does investigation and gives the files to the DPP to charge or to prosecute. Now the judiciary does the adjudication. We are a country that lives under the rule of law, and we give ourselves a constitution that separates the powers of these particular institutions. But if you want to gauge all these institutions work by the cases that are in court, you will realize that if you want to pick the subject that you've picked, the specific public office, state officers that you picked, who are the governors, currently in court, we have 9 previous governors who are in court facing various charges. Some of them, both criminal and civil recovery, others criminal cases, others civil recovery cases. If that is the caliber of people you want to look at.
I'm looking for big fish when I see you.
So describe the big fish.
Let's go with the governors.
Yeah.
How many are in prison?
Well, you see, to be fair to the process, to the conversation, let's discuss the rest. The role of EACC, which is the investigative role. It is the responsibility of the judiciary to determine whether someone is guilty or not. Ours is to present the evidence, to appear in court, take the witnesses, take the exhibits. That is the role of an investigator. And unless we want to, condemn everybody and say anybody and everybody is guilty, we just basically have to follow the law. We have to follow our constitution, whereby there is separation of powers, there is an investigative agency, there is a prosecution agency, and we have our courts.
I ask this because of the second question that Kenyans would ask. The law works swiftly, very well, when it's the small fish, all right? And you'd appreciate that when it is a cop getting caught, taking money from the roadside, that case, really, we have a lot of cases. And if I asked you, you'd give me a lot of examples for that. You'd appreciate that, right? And the question then is, how do you cure, in essence, the public seeing that the big fish, the people who control the big resources, are not yet being put anywhere in where the judiciary, the process, whatever the process, and you being at the center of it? How do you cure this public malaise then that, look, this is a process that happens for the big people in this country, the law does not work. But if someone is caught today, a cop on the road, they'll be taken through the process and it will work quite swiftly. Help me answer that question for the public.
James, let me tell you, there are so many big fishes. If you want to call people big fishes and small fishes, there are so many big fishes being caught right now as we sit here. And
I agree. I take the point.
If you go through our report, you will see what we are talking about. Now, but let me also point it out to you that out of the complaints that we received in the last financial year, the report that we launched today, 46% of Kenyans complained about bribery, which in your question is small fish. Now, if 46% of the complainants that actually reported cases to the commission indicated that it is the small fish that is causing the problem, then probably there's something you are missing. And let me just emphasize why I'm saying that. The answer is very simple, that right. Bribery cases, despite taking the majority of the complaints that come to the commission, actually are the ones that affect the ordinary common person. For example, if there's a young man who is looking for an identity card and is unable to access an identity card that can, open opportunities for him to get a passport, to get employment, that to him is a big deal.
Right.
So it depends where you sit. Yes, big fish.
But you understand the frustration? You do understand the frustration?
I do understand the frustration.
Hang on to that thought, because when I come back and talk about asset recovery, because that's another big thing that you guys are doing, I'm in studio with EACC CEO Abdi Mohamud, answering the very complex questions of law and questions on corruption and bribery. And when on NTV Tonight in studio with me is the EACC CEO, Abdi Mohamud. And when we took a break, we were discussing the difficult questions of big fish, small fish. But now let's take a gear bit and talk about the asset recovery. And today you've announced that you've recovered asset worth 2.9 billion shillings. This being seized from public officers involved in corruption. Talk me around that to the question of how much further do we have? If you look at imports, those 2.9 billion, how much further do we have in cases and investigations that you're processing?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me first of all say that recovery of stolen assets for the Commission is a key strategy that we want to pursue for the simple reason that the reason why people get involved in corruption mainly is for the benefit they accrue out of corruption. And it is reasonable, it is just common sense that you deprive these people from the enjoyment of that particular assets which they've stolen from the public. So on that premise, simply understanding that people steal not for any other reason, but for the benefit that they accrue out of it, it is reasonable and it makes common sense that we must deprive these people of that assets which they've stolen from the public. Now, right now, as we sit here, the Commission is pursuing over 400 cases worth 49.5 billion Kenya shillings worth of assets in various courts in the Republic. Now, you can imagine if we are able to recover 49.5 billion shillings, or even if we recover half of that, that will be huge, boost to the economy. That amount can actually take care of the Commission's budget for 10 years. If, for example, we were to look at it in that perspective. Now, why asset tracing and asset recovery? Number one, when you are dealing with a civil matter, the burden of proof is at a lower level. It's basically on balance of probability. Number two, there's something we call alternative dispute resolution, which is acceptable in asset recovery because it's a civil matter. Where, for example, if one has stolen assets, as much as the criminal matters may continue, one can decide to surrender voluntarily the assets that they have stolen. So it is a faster way of recovering assets and dealing with this thing. It is also a preventive approach in that it dissuades people who would want to risk from risking because they will realize that even if you steal these assets, they will be recovered back. So why take the bother? Why take, the risk of stealing these assets? So the other thing is, it is also a way of restituting assets to the rightful owners, who are the public. So it is a very good approach, which the Commission has been pursuing, and we have been very successful, and we also want to continue pursuing.
I'll ask this before I run out of time. The question of pursuing this and getting the civil matters and having some wins around it, it's evidently a very good thing, but it doesn't resolve the perennial question of whether the EACC needs to have prosecutorial powers. Where do we sit with that today, with that debate?
Well,
for argument purposes.
For argument.
Yes.
Well, you understand the Constitution very clearly that the DPP has the responsibility to either charge, take over, any prosecution, prosecute. But for us, we've had very good working relationship with the DPP, and we want to continue working with him in that manner. Of course, we think that if we were given limited, and here limited is the word I'm using, such that if some of the lawyers at the Commission who are also experienced and who some of them have been prosecutors can be allowed to prosecute some of the cases, not all, under the direction of the DPP, I believe it would have a serious change in the way these cases are handled in court, the criminal cases, that is. Yeah.
What's your final thoughts on the question of corruption as we wind down? Many Kenyans still rightfully believe that, we are under serious deluge of corrupt individuals from government stealing all manner of resources, and they still think that the watchdog, the EACC, is very far away from catching up. what would you tell Kenyans as a word of options and word of caution, you know, as your final thoughts tonight?
Well, corruption is not a Kenyan problem. That is what I want to tell Kenyans. It's a global problem. It is not only an African problem, it's a global problem. That is why we have the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which identified corruption as a key problem all over the world. We at the Commission are doing the best that we can. We will up our game, especially now that I've been appointed as the CEO. I believe I have been there for quite a while. I know the strategies that have succeeded, the strategies that have not succeeded very well.
Right.
I intend to turn around things, use all my energy for the remaining period and turn things around.
All right. Abdi Mohamud, belated congratulations on being the CEO of EACC.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you again. Please come again and again and answer these tough questions on behalf of Kenyans.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much. Well.